Hello, everyone. Sorry for being a few minutes behind schedule today, but better late than never, right? So appreciate you guys for hanging in. So it is Tuesday, the day after a holiday, and I was totally expecting another security event to happen because they for some reason always happen during holidays, like the last few. And so far, we haven't heard about anything bad, right? So that is a good thing. So, no major issues, no major security breaches, and we're still kicking. So, but that doesn't mean that the next one isn't around the corner. And frankly, I guess every day could literally be that. So, no Ken Patterson today. He was tied up in a PAX 8 mission briefing. So he was a little bit already occupied today. So going at it solo again today, keeping the ball rolling. And I got my IT by Design Build It shirt on today. So just love, obviously, the vendor swag from the conferences, right? I mean, of course, we all accumulate them. Yeah, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Like this t-shirt though. And yeah, all good. So few housekeeping rules, not housekeeping rules, but more housekeeping announcements, right? So Channel Strong Tour, right, is coming to the Southwest next week. Cropped up right behind us. So if you're in San Diego, Irvine, Burbank, San Jose, Walnut Creek, so basically 5 stops in California, and then Salt Lake, Vegas, Phoenix, Scottsdale, which also could be that you may be attending the Taylor Business Group Big Conference. If not, we're actually, open invite to people who'd like to join, at least for some of it. And then we end our tour in Denver, basically near PAX 8 HQ, which, going to see a lot of the PAX 8 folks probably sprinkle out and join us. So make sure you go to MSPinitiative.com, click on Channel Strong in the upper toolbar, scroll down. If you want an invite and you're an MSP, select one of these or multiple of these boxes. Sometimes people join us for a few. Send us an invite request, and if you qualify, meaning you're an MSP or IT service provider, somebody in that realm, you're going to get an invite. Hopefully you can join us. So that's under Channel Strong. And then our next giveaway is just firing up. So we definitely, listen, it's literally free gear. So all you got to do is go to this page and put your contact information in. And as a result, you'll be eligible to win one of these 10 prizes. And thank you to our sponsors each day who throw these in every month. Kind of like you went to a trade show, but you didn't, and you still got something cool. So there is the update there. Just figured I'd get this out of the way like we do on every podcast, right? So we make sure people know what's going on. So I'm excited for that, by the way. I think, we really don't know how the back end of the year is going to end up. We're already hearing, some mixed news about the upcoming, kind of bigger events. Are they going to happen? Are they going to have limited headcount? We're still kind of waiting, and kind of a little bit frustrating because obviously people are making their plans. Some of that's fundable, some of that's not. But just for planning purposes, it makes it super difficult to understand what you're actually up to. So the other thing that's happening, and I know that this is kind of more of a tech show, but the other thing that's happening is this upcoming week, the NFL season is upon us. That's why I'm wearing my Eagles hat. Don't judge me for it. Got my IT by Design shirt. Got my NFL hat on because the season is upon us. This upcoming weekend is the beginning, right, of the 17 game NFL season, which means that more football, less preseason, which is behind us now. And of course, I'm a big Eagles fan. Everybody who follows me online, I'm sure, knows that. So this is the time of year where things actually get interesting, right? You got conference season, you got the NFL season, and usually I'm at one or the other. So very pumped for that. I was actually talking to somebody the other day about kind of meshing both worlds here. Cybersecurity at these stadiums, right? Because obviously the stadiums offer in building Wi-Fi, right? Because you know how the cell phone service gets kind of jammed when you put 70, 80, 100,000 people in one place. So obviously a lot of these college and professional arenas have invested in stadium-wide Wi-Fi. But of course, I mean, if used in the wrong way without the right protocols, right? Like all of those devices are connected at once, right? So that's potentially a problem from a security standpoint, because nothing's 100%, right? So it's very interesting to hear how those NFL teams try and tackle that. And the reality is, the inside IT person for the team probably doesn't have enough bandwidth or know-how to actually do that. So anyway, it's something to consider right before you connect to the stadium Wi-Fi. It's something that they may not have 100%, believe it or not. So I hope that they have separate networks for the credit card machines and the terminals rather than people just watching fantasy or connecting to fantasy football. So later on this month, we have two announcements, right? We have a session from Microsoft right before the end of the month on the new Surface lineup that's coming out, right? The new Surface Books. I'm actually on a Surface Book right now. The new Surface Pros, I believe, and the new Duo folding mobile device, right? So that's later on, I think third week in September. And then all of a sudden, Apple jumped ahead of them on the 14th, which is next week. They're coming out with an announcement, and what people are expecting to be announced are the iPhone 13 models. So if you're an iPhone person, pay attention, right? The Apple Watch Series 7 and the new AirPod 3s. So depending on which side of the aisle you're sitting on, there's going to be something new this month to potentially look at, research, and maybe buy. We'll see if there's enough inventory out there to actually get this stuff in time for holiday season, I guess, especially if you're giving out gifts. But little blurb here that I read. So the Apple iPhone 13 models will be similar to the 12 models with a few design changes. 5.4 inch iPhone 13, a 6.1 inch iPhone 13, and 6.1 inch Pro iPhone 13, and then a 6.7 inch iPhone Pro Max. So these things are getting big, right? I hope you have a big enough pocket, or you feel like hauling around a mini computer, because that's kind of what they are. I know the iPod Pros are pretty popular. I mean, I think everybody has them, but I'm curious to see what the AirPods, are going to be on this announcement. So pay attention to those. That's on the 14th. The Microsoft one, I believe, is in the week after. It's funny that like they both kind of fight for that attention time. Of course, we talked about it last time, but Windows 11 becomes general release with the free upgrade come October 5th, I believe it is. However, like Windows 10, I believe there's going to be a period of time where you can actually opt in for the free upgrade, right? And then they kind of turn it off. Last time that was a year. So I don't know if anyone's really ready to migrate batches of customers from Windows 10 to Windows 11, seeing how has all the software vendors caught up and is everything compatible? Don't know. But a lot of the people were saying that by the time they were able to get through that process, that offer had expired, and then you were paying money, right, to go from 10 to 11. So, or from 7 to 10, and ultimately something similar could happen between 10 to 11. So definitely means that everybody's like, oh, Windows 7 is good until 2024, 2025, whatever it is. I was like, so we got 4 or 5 years to figure it out. I was like, but if you want the free upgrade for all of your customers, you got a year to figure it out after, next October, right? So, it's not as much time when you put that context into it as you thought, right? So that's something to consider. I thought this was interesting. Google announced that. Nah, that wasn't that interesting. I thought it was Google Fi, but it wasn't Google Fi. It was Google Fit. And no interest there. So I'm actually just catching up on all of my feeds, right? Because I kind of aggregate all this into one place. So the other thing that was interesting over the weekend was, and there's been more talk about it, actually from last Thursday's call, we talked about the Microsoft price increase. One of the things that we may have not really stipulated a lot on this call that we did on another call with the PAX 8 community call was that price increase we talked about, that 20% increase across the board, and then it's another 20% if you want to stay month to month. So that's potentially a 40% increase, right? And then the question is, well, if we want to go with either a 1 year or a 3 year length, right? You can't downgrade your quantity, right? So let's say we saw this during 2020, the pandemic times, right? Like if I had 40 people in a company, for example, and half the company got laid off because you can't control the situation, you're not going to be able to downgrade those licenses down from 40 to 20 if you're in a 1 year or a 3 year, in order to take advantage of the pricing discount, to basically prevent an additional 20% increase in your pricing. Instead of 20 would be 40 if you stay month to month. You'd have to go under a 1 or a 3 year in order to keep it at 20. So the other things that were kind of in between the lines that weren't really stipulated yet were what happens when you add more users midterm, right? I sign up for a 1 year term to prevent that 40% increase, keep it at 20. And then like when I add another user, let's say I had 40 users, I added a 41st user, is that 41st user co-termed with the original start date, end date, or does a new timeline start just for that order? Or, so now you have different renewal points, right? Like how is that going to work? And then of course, the natural thing that came out of that was, what happens if an end customer leaves one MSP, goes to another? So in that case, are you stuck with the balance of the term if you put the order through, the partner program, or can that balance of that timing be shifted to the gaining MSP? Or are you starting a whole new term and then like, oh, well, the guy who started it got the shaft a little bit. So a lot of questions. It makes it a lot harder, right, to move between vendors, right? Let's say if you're with one distribution company, you want to move to another, do you have to wait till those terms expire before you can move? Or, that you could have some with some vendor, some with another, if you're not big enough to buy through Microsoft Direct, because they keep on raising, kind of the threshold to do that. So lots of questions that could create a lot of complexity for everyone. I know some people bill off their Office 365 user quantity count. And so obviously a lot of other people are saying, hey, maybe I just want to break those Microsoft licenses out, even though I'm still billing per user, so that things don't get kind of sticky, right? Like you might be able to reduce your per user billing agreement stuff, but, so that your customer can, kind of get, stop paying for people that don't exist. But then the Microsoft stuff being line item out separately, you could adjust the quantities, or you could hold the quantities that Microsoft's holding you to, right? So a lot of different quirky operational things. My guess is that people are just going to pay the tax. They're going to pay the 40% hike because, everything changes month to month, right? People come, people go, you add customers, you lose customers. And the whole 1 year or 3 year term thing just makes it very problematic, right? I mean, you basically would have to either charge a customer for the balance, because you potentially would be charged for the balance, or if there's a way for them to transfer that. There was one comment on the call that I thought was interesting. One guy's like, well, there's just not enough room in the licensing from a margin standpoint, from a profitability standpoint. I just sign the customer up direct with Microsoft, forget it, right? Make it their problem, right? Because then the account and the purchase is tied to them as the end user rather than you as an MSP. he might not be wrong. He might not be wrong. But obviously that means a lot of unwinding of what's already out there. And then, yeah, it could be a little bit time consuming, right? If that ends up being the case. So I know what like, because I'm open mic today, I'm gonna, everyone that is on the line, if you want to unmute and chime in, I mean, don't hesitate to open for you guys to collaborate. I mean, but ultimately speaking, I think that this 365 stuff has not seen the end game, right? Just like with the internal use rights, right? People are on action pack, silver, gold, etc. Right? They get like a certain number of things included as part of their software rights or their subscription rights. Remember Microsoft about a year and a half ago said, hey, we're gonna start charging you for those. And then like everybody went bananas. And then ultimately, they kind of stopped and they said, no, we're not going to do that. So there's a period now for us to get a little bit vocal as a community and see if we can get some of this reverse adjusted. Obviously, I think we as the partners have a little bit more flexibility than probably the people who work directly with Microsoft, as like at a partner level, right? When I mean like partner, like distribution, stuff like that. So, if you have a contact at Microsoft, or you hit the forums, hit the threads and get a little bit loud, probably is a time to do that, right? Before it gets closer towards the March 2022 date where you turn it on and see what happens. So just something to keep in mind, just trying to also get new news from that, right? So that we can figure out what's actually happening. So that could definitely be, other than the free upgrade, it's probably only going to be good for a year if they follow what they did before. It would probably be good to, so you have a year now with the Microsoft Windows 10 to 11. Now, obviously, you have less than that time to, convince Microsoft to maybe not do this. So I don't know if it's going to work, but if you don't try, you can't win. So there's that. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I think news came out late last week that Bill Gates is stepping down from Microsoft board. I know that doesn't really mean much to probably to us, but I just thought it was interesting that he decided to pull back from a couple of different boards he's on, and the original founder is still, I'm sure, going to be involved, but is no longer involved in even the board stuff. So just food for thought. So the other thing that came out from Microsoft land, since we're on it, so Microsoft kind of put out an article, or at least a couple companies, wrote articles on it, where they kind of released more information about the SolarWinds cyber attack earlier in the year, right? Like January, February time. So, I'm going to put a link in the chat. It's probably a good one to read to actually get more insight on exactly what happened there. Darren, welcome to the show. I'm going to throw you into the ability to unchat or unmute if you want to. But I'm putting this link in the chat, right? So I'm going to actually share my screen for the people that will watch this after the fact. But let me just do this full screen and we'll share. So, so this is the article, what it was like inside Microsoft during the worst cyber attack in their history. And this is the SolarWinds event in January, February time. So pretty long, probably not something we're going to read totally on this call, but it talks a little bit about what they did internally and the turmoil and how they responded. So they're kind of getting behind the curtain a little bit on what they did directly at Microsoft. And if you remember going back to this, right, Microsoft had some of their source code straight up stolen. I don't know if they actually came out and said which source code to which products, but it's a little bit worrisome since, everybody here does that. So definitely take the time to read this. I think it'll give us a lot more insight on what the bigger companies do during these bigger attacks, right? I mean, obviously, I don't know if the fallout from the Kaseya event is totally done, right? So we still have to see where that lands. But the SolarWinds one happened. I still think people don't even know if they were affected by the SolarWinds stuff, right? But problem is that's the bigger problem, right? You don't know how far that went. And how to protect yourself. So something to be worried about, maybe, but you only know what you know, right? And so it doesn't mean you can't keep on looking for information. So that being said, that's some of the more recent news that has popped up in my feed over the weekend. I read an article earlier today about the federal government training people on cybersecurity. Let me pull that up right now. This I thought was interesting because there's literally not enough people to fill the jobs, and you're looking for a gig, which I'm sure many people now are going to be looking for one. The people that are still at home. I'm going to share this one. I'll put this in the chat as well. It's something to think about. But here you go. I'm going to share this out right here in the chat. This one I thought was intriguing. So the federal government, right, CISA, is basically got to do a new training guide for their cyber workforce, right? So basically they're going out to government employees saying, hey, if you're an IT professional and you want to advance your career, right? Federal, state, local, blah, blah, blah. Here's what you can do to get into cybersecurity, which I thought was super intriguing, right? So small article, I'm sure there's others out there, but they basically don't have enough people to fight back, is what it kind of sort of comes off as. So they're going to go train those people, but of course that takes time. So probably be worth getting into this. It says it's more than 200 pages. Work roles, tasks, knowledge, skills, ability to be successful at the government level in cybersecurity. They say entry, intermediate, and advanced level cybersecurity certifications, professional development training and certification courses, experience, hands-on opportunities, additional cyber resources from across the federal government. So we always ask, like, hey, what are we as a country doing to fight back against the bad guys from other countries? Well, here it is. This is their answer. Very, very interesting that they're going to be training their own employees to jump into cybersecurity. So, of course, we at our level, right? Usually, a lot of people are mostly outsourcing to third parties, right? For their SOC, SIEM, that kind of stuff. I know some people have created their own SOC, but of course that comes with a completely different skill set than what we've been hiring for years in just IT services, right? So really interesting to see what they're doing and how long this will take and what those people are doing. Since we're already in government land, it's probably worth mentioning. We've probably heard a lot about CMMC, right? Which is the Department of Defense cybersecurity program, right? Kind of framework for cybersecurity. So it looks like they've kind of decided where this is going, right? And basically have said what the next kind of shooter drop is in the whole CMMC thing. So I know some MSPs are really actually doing this, right? So it's interesting in here. They say the cost of obtaining CMMC certification can be burdensome for small businesses. Well, most MSPs are small businesses serving small businesses, right? So I'm talking about grants, which could be potentially helpful, right, to offset the cost, right? So level 3 in CMMC, if you look at the CMMC pyramid, is like the middle of the road. That's the one that they say, like, that's really where we should all be at or above. They're saying that certification could take like $52,000 to get through. Similar costing, right, for SOC 2, stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if these grants actually become obtainable, right? Because that can help get you where you're trying to go without, dropping 51 grand a year just to make it work. So there's that. And then the other thing they put out here is a bunch of stuff in terms of milestones, plans, and what they're doing. So CMMC was kind of like PCI, right? It was a self-guided thing where you kind of self-reported. So now they actually have a body that a third party comes in to kind of audit you to make sure you get through the program. So, it's definitely something to think about. And then lastly, from government land, that's worth mentioning is, so I don't know if this, everybody, I don't know if everybody's heard of this infrastructure bill that got passed, at least through the Senate, right? Still kind of out there, hasn't been fully approved, but it looks like a whole chunk of that infrastructure bill is going to be tied to cybersecurity at the government level. So don't want to get super big into the political side of this, but if it does get through, the government's going to be wheeling out the wheelbarrow full of cash on the cybersecurity side. So, not saying that that's for everyone in terms of working with at the federal government level, because obviously it's very difficult and very time consuming. And if you're not set up for that, probably is not going to be great. But, bottom line is that that money's going to be out there if this, this infrastructure bill goes through. So definitely keep an eye out for that to see how these, these grants that they're talking about and how the cybersecurity stuff comes out from the government level. So there's all of that. Darren, picking on you a little bit, buddy. How you doing today?
George, I'm standing in line for security, so not a great time as well. Sorry.
My favorite time, right? Security time. Call us back.
Yeah, I'll still listen, but okay.
Yeah, all good. So Darren in security, I hope he has a lot better experience that I usually have for security. So really interesting, right? So Starlink has been out for, I don't know, let's say 6 to 8 months. I'm curious how many people have actually gotten through, right? There's kind of like the Tesla waiting line, right? Starlink has been, kind of gangbusters, right? With this satellite-based internet, going at about, what is it, $100 a month for 50 meg satellite internet, 50 to 150. So, I'm reading something here saying that Elon Musk said Starlink will double its speed to 300 megabits with lower latency within the next year. It has already launched 1,000 satellites, and most of their customers are in US and Canada. So I don't know if anybody's actually gotten their hands on this thing. I don't know what it looks like, what it feels like. If the latent, obviously the big knock on satellite is just latency, right? 600, 700, 800 milliseconds latency, which for a lot of stuff would break and not really run well. But I guess the catch is low latency, right? If they can get these speeds at a low latency, that's the catch. So for about $99 a month, and if you're in the US or Canada, because that seems where the beta is, hey, I would think this could be potentially an alternative, not just for rural people who are literally stuck on either 4G/5G with a cap or DSL. Starlink could be another option for you. Could also be another option for redundancy, right? Like we saw the hurricane come through New Orleans last week and then ultimately hit the Northeast and just caused pretty historic flooding, in some cases worse than Sandy. I know here in Philadelphia, they said this was the worst flooding they've seen since like the late 1800s. So obviously if the central office locations or like the nodes for the cable and DSL guys out there are underwater, your internet's not going to work, right? I mean, it's just not, right? If the node's underwater. So where Starlink might be able to help, and I don't know how it does through weather, but this could be your redundant solution, right? I know a lot of people say, hey, I got 4G backup, but those 4G towers still have to be connected to landlines, right, at the tower. And if the power goes out, then your battery backup at the tower is only going to go for so long, and then obviously they die. So that was a big problem back in Sandy here in the Northeast. Katrina, obviously, way back in New Orleans, right? I mean, they just ran out of power, and the battery backups could only go for so long. So, satellite internet may be the future. Another article that popped up here I thought was interesting. 39% of all internet traffic are from bad bots. 40% basically of all internet traffic from bad bots. This actually came out from Barracuda. Bad bots include basic web scrapers, attack scripts, as well as advanced persistent bots. So these advanced bots try and evade standard defenses and attempt to perform malicious activities under the radar. So I thought this was interesting. Sorry, should have switched my phone off. Sorry about that, guys. But let me share this screen. I thought was intriguing. As Barracuda is actually in the Microsoft, or I'm sorry, the MSP space, but they actually reference Microsoft in this article. Let me share this. There you go. Bad bots internet traffic by location. 67% North America, then Europe, Asia, Oceania. You know, it's like Australia, New Zealand area, South America, Africa. So 40% of internet traffic. And then more European bot traffic was more likely to come from hosting services, virtual private servers, residential IBs than North America, which most originate from public data centers. So the bad guys have figured it out, right? I love the people who are like, oh, you know, I just go into the firewall and I do the geo filtering and then we're good. Well, they're spinning up traffic in Amazon and Azure, then they're going to be coming from US facing IPs, right? I mean, obviously that's clearly what they're saying here, because most bot traffic comes from there. So very interesting, right? You know, as much as we're trying to scale from you know, actually business technology, the bad guys are utilizing the same capability, the instant access to resources on the same platforms, right? To do bad guy stuff. So, you know, the things that were working 5, 8, 10 years ago, yeah, well, not quite working today. So it's really bothersome, right? And that's where the whole cybersecurity craze is going on for sure. This, I always love reading the space guys. This one's interesting, where they come out and say, share my screen, an internet apocalypse could ride to Earth with the next solar system or solar storm. So they're basically saying, hey, you know, knock out the internet. I don't remember the internet ever being knocked out from a solar storm, but apparently it happens. And I don't know how many of your people are talking to your customers about disaster recovery from a solar storm, but 2 storms of record, one in 1859, one in 1921, where obviously there weren't internet. They're talking about telegraph wires bursting into flames. So copper's copper, I guess. So I wonder when this is coming. Undersea cables shouldn't be affected. Okay, so obviously that'll help, but that doesn't help the domestic landline people. Next big solar storm blast, and we'll have about 13 hours to prepare for its arrival. I'm sorry, I've actually never heard of this. So economic impact of internet disruption for a day in the US is estimated to be over $7 billion. What if the network remains non-functional for days or months? Yeah, we're talking about the cell phone towers not having enough battery backup to last long enough. I mean, you know, if the landlines are literally bursting, that feeds all the, you know, the 4G, 5G guys anyway. So that could be a problem. I don't know what the answer is to that one. But just to prove a point, we talked about, you know, hurricanes, right? I mean, here's another article out that says that New Orleans is still without power and internet. Cox Communications restored 85% in the greater Baton Rouge, but 60% of New Orleans are still without internet. So obviously, I guess the argument is don't live in an area where hurricanes come consistently, but you know, obviously the world runs online. So that could be a problem. All right. That could be a problem if your customer is down for a long period of time. I know that there was a couple of mentions about the Datto 4G failover in their DNAs, and I saw in one forum that I guess they had the normal caps were potentially being lifted, right, to help those people in that area, which is cool of them. All right. Cause obviously that's, you know, real deal, right? I mean, you know, when you're blown out, but obviously the problem is, you know, when your whole business runs on the internet, which many do, you know, it's a problem when you're down for weeks and weeks and weeks. So solar storm, no idea, but I guess we'll have to do some research into this one. Another one from Internet Land, which I thought was interesting here. New Zealand internet outage blamed on denial of service attack on nation's third largest internet provider. So if it's not one angle, it's another, guys. Right? I mean, so Vocus, 30-minute outage across the entire country. Wow. Could you imagine an entire country down for 30 minutes? Thought this was also interesting as a feed in the feed. I saw this last week. A little bit more fun to what I'm doing here, but UK VoIP telco literally got, these are the same guys behind Kaseya, apparently the same guys behind SolarWinds, but ReEvil, right? Or somebody affiliated with them, kind of took this VoIP company out, two VoIP companies out that are based out of the UK. So DDoS attack, right? We're not saying that their infrastructure was compromised. It was more just they didn't have big enough pipes to handle the bot traffic coming through. And so this is not new, but obviously when they're targeting specific companies, two companies in this case, right? That's frustrating, right? And while there's DDoS protection usually offered at the data center level, right? Like you can pay money to get that type of service in place from most vendors that offer data center space. Can you really do that at the local ISP level, right? The last mile, the Comcast, the Cox, Time Warner, Verizon Fios, Frontier, right? Like it's really not offered there. So really, really something to think about, right? It's kind of like the solar storm knocking out the internet for a while, right? Like, what do you do when your customer's local ISP, like the IP address that's hanging off that local ISP gets hit, right? What will they do? What can you do? I'm not sure there's really a lot of options at the broadband level, right? Fiber to the building, not enterprise fiber, but fiber to the building, or coax or even DSL, right? So something to think about. I'm sure at some point they would shut off the traffic just because the network's getting overloaded, but that doesn't necessarily keep you online. So something to think about there. Of course, multiple providers, right? And hope that you don't both get hit at the same time. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So back to business land, Cisco WebEx calling with 4 million customers beats out the darling child of the pandemic, Zoom. How about that? Everybody thought Zoom was going to be uncatchable. Here you go. Cisco WebEx calling, 4 million customers beats out Zoom. So you really didn't hear about WebEx, right? You thought it was mostly Zoom versus Teams. Well, apparently they're back in the game. Quietly snuck up and caught Zoom by surprise, apparently. So very intriguing, right? Because a lot of these platform companies.
Hello,
right?
And welcome. I'm Kenna Johnson from the Channel Company. For more than 20 years,
Thanks, Jenna. I don't need to hear you, but
NPD Group has given a comprehensive view into the B2B.
Kill this. So what's interesting is that these platform companies have come out with effectively a bolt-line, right? Just literally connecting like a cell phone, more or less, to the user to make and receive calls, right? From a phone system capability, right? Like Zoom had to go out and acquire 5.9 to get past the basics, right? Like they couldn't build it out fast enough. Microsoft also acquired a company mostly for this 5G virtualization at the 5G level called Metaswitch. But Metaswitch also has a lot of phone system style functionality. We don't know if that'll ever make it into Teams, but these platform companies, right? Most of these web collaboration companies have been doing this bolt-line thing. And it's working, right? For people who don't really need much functionality. But it seems like when they have to get past the basics, like not even to the level of a traditional kind of box in the wall phone system, they have to go out and acquire it, right? Because their services really weren't designed to get there. So you got to be careful. I did a whole session with MSP Geek just 2 weeks ago about what's a part of the standard Microsoft Teams voice solution, what you're not going to get, what's around the corner. The big one was basic third-party phone support, right? The non-Microsoft Android embedded proprietary style phones. Like they'll be able to support a generic VoIP phone, but hey, heads up, very basic functionality, right? No line parks and BLF keys and stuff like that, which quite frankly, are one of the main reasons people wouldn't go that way. But, and they're also next year during that 20 to 40% hike, going to be including the Microsoft call-in conferencing solution for meetings, right? That's just going to be included in Business Standard, Business Premium, E1, E3, E5. Usually you have to actually add something on, like a $4-ish SKU. So apparently after that price hike next year in March, that's just going to be included as part of those, which is great. But as a conferencing solution, awesome. As a phone system solution, not great. So we actually went through an entire webinar that was about just all the options with Teams, right? Especially direct routing. So if you're interested in going down that road, I highly suggest that you Google that. Just go to mspgeek.org and you'll go under their sessions, and that one will be there. So top 10 biggest security risks businesses face in 2021. Another article by CRN. But so I'm going to go in order, right? Cloud misconfigurations. Well, yeah, even Microsoft just came out the other day with Power Apps and the databases being, open to the world. Oops. We've also heard similar things with the Amazon S3 bucket storage, stuff like that. And then obviously Google has a similar service as well. So, if it's not configured right and you haven't, kind of made sure that it's not exposed, yeah, not a good day when somebody stumbles along that. So keyword searches during ransom attacks is number 2. So they call them smash and grab operations, where the victim gets their files locked, demand the Bitcoin, ransomware, that kind of stuff. We know that, right? I said, but one of the first things threat actors will search for is the victim's cyber insurance policy to determine how large of a ransom they should ask for. Hackers look to get their hands on records that are protected by regulators like HIPAA so that they can demand larger ransoms. So basically they have an automated process of scanning devices, servers, and other areas of the victim's environment for documents that contain keywords. So basically they're using your own search tool against you, right? To find out how to really hurt you. That's crazy. Didn't even think about that, but it makes total sense. Number 3, top biggest cybersecurity risks for businesses this year: lack of segmentation for remote workers, right? So making things from the internal network exposed to the remote people, such as just firing up a VPN for everybody at home with no restricted access, especially if the home computers are not work computers that have securities in place, right? So if the home computer's network is less secure, you open up a VPN to hopefully a work-based computer, but maybe they're home, it's kind of opened up the whole network. There's no zero trust. So something that we've talked about in the past, kind of in passing, but SASE is the new technology segment that apparently is really coming up in the ranks to kind of address this, right? SASE, it's not really popular yet because it hasn't, kind of bubbled up to mass adoption by any means, but I think a lot of vendors are rushing to try and deploy a SASE solution. So keep your eyes out for that. Next one, cloud infrastructure and SaaS. I'm like, I thought cloud infrastructure was supposed to make things secure. So it says cloud infrastructure and SaaS configurations continue to remain a blind spot for the majority of businesses. Don't understand the risks associated with misconfigurations of the cloud or SaaS accounts. Of course, we said lack of resources to understand, which I just mentioned earlier about the NFL stadiums. So yeah, same problem with storage as it is to actually cloud servers and SaaS accounts. Of course, SaaS could be anything from an electronic health record to a Salesforce to, pretty much everything's going SaaS. QuickBooks Online, right? That kind of stuff. So something to be considered. The next one that they have on the list here is targeting family members of executives. So like, I'm trying to get you the CEO. So I'm trying to figure out anyone attached to you, right? Cousins, uncles, nieces, aunts, whatever, siblings, parents. So they literally hit the family member's machine, which is not going to obviously have the same security as the work computer. And then through their account, try and get to the person that they're after. Makes sense. I mean, makes sense. But obviously targeting mom at home who has no idea what's a bad link or a good link, potentially, right? I mean, they end up using their account to send you something. You click on it. Gotcha. Surprise, surprise, as we talked about for many weeks now, third-party service providers, right? So they said from video conferencing to whiteboard products to file sharing, companies that are using more technology to facilitate remote work and close the gaps that don't exist when employees are working together, right? So basically every new technology vendor in the organization's supply chain introduces another layer of risk. And they actually mentioned SolarWinds, Excellion, and hear about that one, and Kaseya. Bring up those three in this topic, which I didn't even get to, and I already kind of surmised that, right? So it makes it a little bit harder, right, to select vendors and for vendors to do what they need to do to make you feel comfortable that and confident that they got the, you know, the story down and the solution in place. But yeah, obviously we've seen the supply chain story play out a little bit more than we like to admit. Next one is lack of external vulnerability scanning. So it's very interesting, right? Vulnerability scanning was kind of not a thing. And then obviously there are a lot of companies that do vulnerability scanning. Of course, they all look for different things. There's not a one size fits all, I don't think. But basically it says organizations start dealing with vulnerabilities inside their own systems. Business should be setting up their servers externally and doing external scans to get a better sense of what the threat actor would look like from the outside. So, you know, there's a lot of tools out there. I don't know what people are using in MSP, small, and especially in small business land. Is it even affordable? That's obviously a big question, right? It's going to cost you $5,000 for a vulnerability scan. For some people, that may be more than what MSP collects from the end customer for the whole year, right? So that could be frustrating. So we're at number 9, which says holding data hostage, right? Most powerful asset any organization has is customer, internal, corporate, or intellectual property data. Businesses are just typically concentrated around data. So bad guys have become more focused on holding a victim's data hostage rather than selling it to someone else. Sometimes they do both, right? They get the double dip, as we've heard about, right? So it says defenders should start understanding what data could potentially be exposed. Standards such as HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2, mentioned those earlier. So, and then it says businesses should address cyber risk profile by looking at what their business assets and processes are exposed to the outside world. And then obviously look for tool security, encryption, and other stuff. Well, I mean, it could also be that you don't put all your data in one place. I know that that's kind of hard because that's traditionally how it's been designed, right? I mean, you just hope to lock it down by permissions. Maybe it's just making sure that certain data is literally on separated systems so that if they do, bad guy got, you know, obviously we hope this doesn't happen, but if a bad guy does get into your stuff, they don't get into everything. You kind of limit your bleeding a little bit ahead of time. So, you know, I know that's probably obvious, but I say it anyway. And we're at number 10, right? So a list of 10 cybersecurity things that affect businesses here in 2021. Targeting of companies with cyber insurance. Well, it's funny because me and Darren talked about this at length, earlier a month ago, but obviously everybody should be getting cyber insurance. And we talked about the cyber insurance companies making it harder and harder and harder, or raising their premiums, right? Depending on what you're actually saying you're doing versus not. And then of course we talked about cyber insurance companies not paying out if you check the box that you actually didn't do. And And then you heard it earlier in the year about right after around that Kaseya time, where one of the insurance vendors came out and said, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, turn on all your stuff, we're going to drop you. We're not going to even hold the policy, probably because they're getting hit, right? So, of course, it says smaller businesses weren't attractive ransomware targets historically, but because everybody is now adopting cyber insurance, which I'm sure most of us in IT land are recommending to our customers, if not offering it. Basically, they're looking up if you're covered by a cybersecurity insurance policy to figure out if you're worth even attacking, which is very interesting because at some point, rubber's got to meet the road, right? The insurance industry isn't going to pay out forever without doing something, of course, correct, right? So, of course, they say people with cyber insurance are more likely to pay the ransom, obviously, if they're covered. And then it says, cyber insurance moves beyond large enterprise, pushes down market and SMB. It'll be interesting to see what regulations and requirements cyber insurance providers start to enforce as part of the underwriting process. So we've all really kind of talked about this in one way or another over the years. And yeah, it's a problem. Last one actually on this list, I guess I was one slide off, but extorting ransomware victims, right? So it says ransomware has become less about locking consumer out of devices and more about extorting them by threatening to release or leak their personal data, sensitive data. Threat actors attack people's identity and reputation by releasing emails, private conversations, sensitive files they've taken to friends, coworkers, employees. Yeah, this is the double ransom I talked about earlier, right? It's not just encrypting your data and then charging you to get a decryptor or get it back. It's also, hey, I've copied data out of your system, and if you don't pay me not only once, but maybe even twice, I'm going to release that and try to, make you look bad, right? So, so obviously, they said the bad guys are starting to realize that people are actually starting to back up their stuff. It only took decades. So this is their alternate avenue, right? Hey, okay, you got a backup, great. But if you don't want your stuff out on the street, I'm gonna charge you a tax. They call that the double ransom. You back with us, Darren, here at the end?
Well, it's interesting too, George, to think that the notion that you pay them and then they threaten to extort, that they're not going to just do it anyway. I don't know. It seems I guess maybe they don't, but that there's still a copy of that stuff somewhere, right? So it's kind of
yeah, that's the problem, right? A lot of the people who have had a breach of some sort, even if they bring in an incident response team, right? Even if they bring in the insurance carrier's vendor to figure out what's what, a lot of the time they can't even tell what information.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. A lot of times they don't even understand what information's been compromised, been taken, been copied. So of course, we're hearing a lot that a lot of the times these attacks and these breaches happened well in advance of when you ultimately figured it out. And because they've had that long game plan in place, they've been able to, make it a lot harder to see what they actually did. So, the fact that they're getting savvy enough to actually start searching for data, figuring out if you have an insurance policy, targeting the data that's most important to you as an organization or an individual, just means that the bad guys are way, way more capable and way more strategic than we thought. So, hey, nothing that we don't already know, but now it's in black and white in print, right? So that list of 10 things came directly from a CRN article. So all that being said, thanks everybody for tuning in. Of course, this session, every other session was recorded and available on shortly thereafter on mspinitiative.com under sessions. Again, if you're in that Southwest US area, I'd love to join you on the road outside in the fresh air on the Channel Strong Tour. So definitely hit us up starting not this week, but next week is when the tour starts. And that goes for 2 weeks. And then don't forget to sign up for those monthly giveaways, because you really just don't have to do anything other than put your name in and you might be picked out of a hat. So sounds good to me. see you guys on this upcoming Thursday. Again, we do these Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And of course, we'll be doing these from the road. I'll actually be on the road this time with good old Ken. So we'll be able to take the show on the road. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.